Welcome to part 9 of this video series that describes making a steam test plant. This video covers making the condenser oil trap. Exhaust from a model steam engine is piped to this vessel which separates oily water from exhaust steam. The oily water can be drained from the vessel and the steam is piped to the boiler stack. This photo shows a piece of 3-inch diameter copper tube which has been cut to 6 inches long on my metal cutting chop saw. This will form the vertical sides of the condenser. I set the tube in a vise on the milling machine in preparation for drilling. I used a rule to center a center drill over the tube. This is a very useful technique. When the rule is horizontal, the drill is centered over the work. The position of the steam exhaust inlet was then center drilled. The hole was then drilled using a 1/4-inch drill and opened to dimension with an 11/64" drill. Copper isn't very easy to drill in my opinion, anyway I got through it without too much trouble. Next, I turned the tube 90 degrees in the milling vise and drilled the holes for the sight glass fittings. This clip shows one of the holes being center drilled. I drilled the sight glass holes with a 1/4-inch drill and then opened it up to 3/8 inch. This clip shows one of the holes being drilled 3/8 inch. I moved on to the lathe to make the bushes for the sight glass fittings. This photo shows the tube for the condenser, the bushes, and the inlet nozzle that I made off camera. Next, I moved on to the base for the condenser. I cut a piece of 1/8 inch brass plate to 3.5 inches square, squared it off in the mill, and set it up in the 4-jaw chuck on the lathe. This clip shows cutting a recess in the base that the tube will insert into. The recess acts as a well for soft solder to flow into and hold the tube in place. After cutting the recess, I moved on to drilling the base mounting holes. This clip shows drilling one of the holes 0.150 inches in diameter, which is clearance size for the wood screws I'll be using. I marked out the corners of the base, using a washer as a guide, and then rounded them on the sander. This gives a nice finishing touch to the base of the condenser oil trap. This clip shows the lid being turned down to diameter. I started with a piece of 1/8 inch brass plate rough cut to 3.25 inch diameter, sanded it close to round, drilled the center to a 1/4 inch diameter, and mounted it on a mandrel in the 3-jaw chuck. I used thin cuts to avoid the lid spinning in the mandrel. I then cut a step in the lid to locate it on the tube of the condenser. The step was cut to a depth of 1/16 inches and a width of 0.90 inches. I test fitted the tube onto the lid to ensure that it fitted okay. The hole I used to secure the lid into the mandrel was opened up using a letter S drill, which is tapping size for 3/8 inch 32 threads per inch. This hole will be the outlet from the condenser oil trap. I then tapped the hole 3/8 inch 32 threads per inch, which will allow me to screw a 1/4 inch tube commercial union into the lid. I'll use this to connect exhaust piping that will run to the boiler chimney. This photo shows all the components for the condenser oil trap completed, cleaned up, and ready for soft soldering. I then soft soldered all the components together. This clip shows soldering the tube onto the base. I applied solder paste on the inside of the tube and then applied heat until I could see the solder in the recess machined in the base. I added solder where necessary to fill in any gaps. It's important to ensure all components are very clean before soldering. When soldering, it's important to apply an even, indirect heat to the parts. This photo shows the completed condenser oil trap which has been cleaned up, ready for painting. After soldering all components together, I leak tested the vessel using 2 psi air pressure and soapy water. There were no leaks, which was great. I'm going to be using the condenser to lay out the steam plant on the bench so that I can work out the size of the baseboard. I'll paint the condenser oil trap off camera. So, that's the condenser oil trap for the steam plant completed. I'd like to give a big shout out to Keith Appleton, as I used many of his techniques while making the vessel in this video. I'll put a link to Keith's YouTube channel in the description below. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you.